Sunday night, the house was full of champagne, startup talk, and fake smiles. My stepson Tyler stood in the middle of the living room like Wall Street had already crowned him. Then he turned to me, slid a sealed envelope across the table, and told me to get out of his company before the IPO. He said I was too old, too slow, too embarrassing to keep around. My wife froze. His investors watched. Nobody stepped in. I opened the letter, saw the signature, and laughed. Tyler thought he had just removed dead weight. He had no idea what he had terminated. My name is Michael Rowan. I am 55. I live in Willow Glen, San Jose, California. I work as a software architect. And I am telling you this because my stepson thought he was cleaning up his leadership team before an IPO. He actually terminated the license behind the only engine keeping his company alive. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. I did not give Tyler the scene he wanted in front of his guests. I stayed quiet for one reason. My wife Elaine was standing 3 feet away, caught between her son and her husband. I loved her too much to turn her living room into a battlefield. But before the market opened the next morning, Tyler was going to learn the price of calling borrowed power his own. Stay with me here. People like Tyler never hated what I knew. They hated that I never needed an audience. That bothered him more than any argument ever could. I drove a silver Lexus. I wore plain blue shirts from Costco. At Helix Harbor Systems, that made me look disposable. To Tyler, and the executives around him, I was the old guy who still believed software should be stable before it was pretty. They called me legacy with a smile. They called me cautious when they wanted to sound polite. When they wanted to be cruel, they called me slow. What they never said out loud was the part that mattered. Every major client demo they bragged about rested on an engine I built. Every uptime number in their investor deck leaned on architecture I wrote. Every promise Tyler made about scale, resilience, and growth passed through VectorCore before it ever reached a slide. Helix Harbor had not started as a glamorous company. It started in a cramped office with cheap desks, bad coffee, and cords where they should not have been. Back then, Tyler was still learning how to pitch. I was the one teaching the system how to survive. VectorCore was not a side feature. It was the spine. It handled the routing, balancing, and recovery logic that kept enterprise data moving when traffic spiked and clients panicked. When the company almost lost its serious contract, VectorCore saved it. Tyler got quoted in a tech article that week. I got asked if I could sleep in the office 2 more nights. I did not complain. I had built enough things in life to know attention and value rarely arrived together. Still, I noticed the pattern. Tyler went on podcasts. Tyler met the funds. Tyler used words like visionary and category defining. Then he came home for Sunday dinner and joked that I was lucky to have married into a family. Elaine would tense up every time he did that. She would reach for her glass, then put it back down untouched. I could feel her waiting for me to answer, and every time, I let the silence take it instead. I stayed quiet because peace mattered to her. That is the simple version. The deeper one is this. Tyler only felt tall when someone else was forced to stand lower. If I challenged him too early, he would turn it into a family war. If I let him keep climbing, he would eventually step too far on paper. Before I joined Helix Harbor, I had formed Rowan Logic LLC for consulting work. VectorCore was built there first. The original repository, design notes, and registration records all traced back to me. When Tyler needed the engine, I let the company use it under a conditional license. Royalty-free while I remained a lawful active employee in the role that maintained it. Clean. Simple. Signed. Legal had raised questions more than once as the IPO process picked up speed. I saw the emails. Chain of title. Control language. Disclosure cleanup. Tyler brushed them aside and said they would tidy everything after listing. Then he kept walking into investor meetings and calling VectorCore our proprietary platform. That word stayed with me for months. Proprietary. He said it too easily. By the time he slid that envelope across Elaine's table, I was not shocked that He wanted me gone. I was only waiting to see how stupid he would choose to be. Then he showed me. Tyler Beck was the kind of man investors loved in the first 7 minutes. Young, clean, fast, and expensive. Tailored suits. He knew how to enter a room. He knew how to hold a pause. He knew how to make borrowed language sound like original thought. That was his real product. Not software. Story. That made him dangerous in rooms. Tyler could stand in front of numbers he barely understood and make other people feel late for not believing in him sooner. They confused speed with depth. He encouraged the mistake. What Tyler did not know, he covered with tone. What he did not build, he renamed. What he could not explain, he framed as old thinking. It was a clean trick. Polished. Modern. Dependent on people like me staying quiet. Inside the company, he almost never insulted me directly in meetings. He was too trained for that. He preferred cleaner cuts. He left my name off product updates. He moved younger executives into rooms I should have been in. He had marketing use phrases like next-generation architecture while I was still the one answering emergency calls at 2 a.m. When a major client renewed, Tyler thanked sales. When a system held through a surge weekend, he thanked operations. When a board member asked who designed the failover logic, Tyler smiled and said it was a team effort. That phrase followed me for years. Team effort. Sunday dinners were his favorite stage. Not because he loved family. Because family gave him witnesses who could not bill him for the performance. He would sit at Elaine's table, lean back like he owned the air, and throw little knives wrapped in jokes. Mike still writes code like the internet is on dial-up. Mike thinks risk is a personality flaw. Mike keeps the lights on. We build the future. People laughed because they wanted the evening to survive. Elaine tried to soften it. She would ask if anyone wanted more tea, another roll, more salad. Tyler would keep going until the room adjusted around him. I never gave him the fight he wanted. That frustrated him more than anger would have. Tyler needed reaction. He needed proof that he could move a man twice his age with one sentence. When I just looked at him and kept eating, his smile always tightened a little. He treated his own mother the same way. That part mattered more than anything he said to me. Elaine paid for his softness for years. He called when he wanted praise or absolution. He dismissed her questions when they slowed him down. He corrected her in front of people. He treated care like weakness. She still loved him. Mothers do not turn that off on command. But love is not blindness. By the time the IPO got close, even Elaine had started watching him with a tired face I had never seen before. She asked me one night if Tyler respected anyone. I told her yes. Documents. She laughed, then stopped. Because she knew I meant it. That was why I had waited so long. Not because I was passive. Not because I was afraid of losing a title. I stayed still because I understood the battlefield better than Tyler did. If I challenged him too early, he would turn it into a story about a resentful stepfather trying to hold back the next generation. He would drag Elaine into the middle and call it unfortunate. I wanted the opposite. Silence. Paper. A room where charisma had no voting rights. The IPO process changed the company. Bankers appeared on screens. Outside counsel started using phrases like diligence calendar and disclosure schedule. Internal decks multiplied. Claims got bigger. And through all of it, Tyler got bolder. He started talking about cleaning up leadership before listing. Making sure everyone on the org chart reflected where the company was going, not where it had been. I knew what that meant the first time he said it. He was not looking at performance. He was looking at optics. My age. My quiet. My refusal to play startup theater. In Tyler's mind, that made me baggage. In mine, it made him predictable. Still, I did not move. I let him keep walking. I let him keep talking. I let him believe the company was already his in every way that mattered. Because the truth was simpler than his pitch deck. He was the face. I was the engine. And faces always forget what happens when the engine stops agreeing to be ignored. Tyler did not make his move in private. That would have required shame. He made it in Elaine's living room with jazz still playing, dessert plates still on the table, and 2 people from one of the funds close enough to hear every word. He lifted his glass first. That was the part one remember most. Not the envelope. Not the insult. The toast before the cut. He talked about momentum. Discipline. A leaner leadership team for a public company. He said Helix Harbor had outgrown sentimental roles and legacy habits. Then he looked straight at me as if I were a slide he had decided to delete. The room went quiet in stages. First the laughing stopped. Then the forks stopped. Then even the music seemed too loud. Tyler smiled and slid the envelope across Elaine's dining table. He said I had been a useful bridge. He said bridges were not meant to become monuments. Then he told me the company needed people who matched the future, not the past. Old. Slow. Embarrassing. He did not spit the words. He polished them. That made them worse. Elaine said his name once. Just once. It came out low and thin. Tyler did not even look at her. I picked up the envelope and felt how light it was. Thin paper. Expensive printing. Cheap judgment. Inside was a formal termination letter from Helix Harbor Systems. Effective immediately. My title removed. My access scheduled for deactivation at 7 the next morning. The reason was written in language companies use when they want cruelty to sound strategic. Failure to align with pre-IPO leadership needs. That line was insulting. It was not the line that mattered. The line that mattered sat lower on the page, calm and ordinary. My employment as an active officer and technical lead was terminated as of that date and time. I read it twice. Then I checked the timestamp. A warm silence opened inside my chest. Tyler mistook it for defeat. I could see that in his face. He thought I was doing the math every man does when he gets humiliated in front of his wife. Mortgage. Pride. Age. What comes next? I was doing different math. Lawful active employee. That phrase lived in the license agreement for Vector Core. I knew where it sat on the page. 3rd paragraph of the addendum. One condition among several. Easy to miss. Impossible to survive once triggered. Tyler had not just fired me. He had changed my legal status. In writing. Immediately. In front of witnesses. On the night before the company planned to ring the bell. I folded the letter once. Cleanly. Then I looked up at him and asked the only question that mattered. So this is effective tonight. He gave me a smug nod. Read the date, Mike. I laughed. Full and sharp. Nobody joined in. I set the letter back on the table, reached for my coat, and said all right. Tyler thought the laugh meant I had finally cracked. It did not. It meant I had just heard the first sound of his IPO breaking apart. I left Elaine's house without slamming a door. That mattered. Tyler had staged the evening like a victory lap. I was not going to give him an ending he could replay for his friends. The night air in Willow Glen felt cooler than it should have. I put the termination letter on the passenger seat of my Lexus and drove home with both hands steady on the wheel. No music. No calls. No anger. Just one sentence looping in my head. Lawful active employee. My garage was half workshop, half storage. In the far cabinet sat an archive box with a label. Rowan Logic. I had not touched it in months. I carried it inside. Quiet. Ordinary. Then I set it on my kitchen table, washed my hands, and made coffee before I opened it. Men make mistakes when they touch revenge before paperwork. Inside the box sat the spine of Tyler's future. The formation papers for Rowan Logic LLC. Copyright records. Development logs. Repository snapshots. Early design notes for Vector Core. Then the agreement that mattered most. The conditional license Helix Harbor signed so they could use the engine without paying royalties while I remained their lawful active technical lead. Simple language. Heavy consequences. I read the clause again anyway. Not because I doubted it. Because precision keeps pride from turning into stupidity. The condition was still there. Clean. Intact. Signed by Tyler. I took a picture of the termination letter next to the relevant page and sent both to Dana Rios. Dana was a commercial attorney in Palo Alto. Sharp voice. No wasted words. She had reviewed the license years earlier, and told me then that one day this clause would either save me or embarrass somebody careless enough to ignore it. She called in 11 minutes. Did he terminate you in writing? Yes. Effective immediately? Yes. Do you still have administrative access? For a few more hours. Good. Do not touch anything you cannot defend in court. Preserve records. Pull logs. Then step back. That was why I trusted her. Dana never spoke like a movie. She spoke like a judge was already reading. I spent the next hour doing only what the agreement allowed. I preserved emails. I copied infrastructure logs. I documented the state of production. I exported the authentication history tied to Vector Core. Then I isolated the license components that depended on my authorization to remain active. I did not delete a single file. I did not crash a single server. I did not plant anything. I did not take revenge through sabotage. What I did was smaller. Cleaner. Worse for him. At 12:43 a.m., Dana sent the formal notice. Rowan Logic LLC was terminating Helix Harbor's right to use Vector Core under the clause Tyler had triggered with his own letter. She copied General Counsel, the board chair, and litigator Marcus Lee. By 1:10 a.m., my role had changed. I was no longer the old engineer Tyler had thrown out of a dining room. I was now the man holding the contract everyone wished they had reread. I went back into the system one last time and disabled the license authentication path for the modules covered by the agreement. Not the data. Not the customer records. Not the entire platform. Only the core engine Helix no longer had the legal right to run. That difference was everything. At 2:04 a.m., an automated alert hit my inbox. Vector Core nodes had entered fail-safe mode. Throughput would degrade. Load balancing would narrow. Recovery automation would stop scaling at full capacity. The platform would stay standing for a while, but not in the polished way Tyler had promised bankers and funds. At 2:19 a.m., my phone lit up with the first call from Helix Operations. I let it ring. At 2:31, a text from the CFO. What changed? At 2:36, another. Mike, call me now. We can fix this. I set the phone face down and kept reading Dana's draft for the morning filing. Temporary restraining order. Preservation notice. Demand for immediate cessation of unlicensed use. Every page calm. Every sentence expensive. Do not skip this part. What kills arrogant men is rarely the first insult. It is the paperwork they assume nobody else is organized enough to keep. Around 3 a.m., Tyler finally called. I watched his name flash on the screen until it stopped. Then a text came in. Whatever game this is, end it. I almost smiled. Game was the wrong word. Games leave room for bluffing. This was arithmetic. He had changed my status. The contract had changed his rights. The system was only obeying the truth. At 4:12 a.m., Dana sent one final message. You do not respond directly to anyone now. Let them panic in writing. So I did. By sunrise, the company was not dead. That would have been too simple. It was worse for a man like Tyler. It was uncertain. Slower. Fragile. And heading into the most important morning of his life with 3 white pages explaining why. That was when I knew the real collapse had already begun. By 8:18 a.m., the panic had found structure. That is when it gets real. Before that, people still think a crisis is a glitch. A delay? A bad handoff. Something a tired engineer can fix with coffee and a patch. But once lawyers start separating facts from assumptions, the room changes shape. Dana had already pulled Marcus Lee into the case. Marcus handled emergency filings and injunction work. He did not ask how I felt. He asked what could be proved. That was the right question. We built the morning around 3 hard pieces of evidence. Not opinions. Not memories. Not family history. Paper. Dates. Logs. Signatures. The first was ownership. I sent Marcus the original vector core creation trail from Rowan Logic LLC. Repository snapshots dated months before I ever joined Helix Harbor. Early architecture diagrams with my name on internal headers. Copyright registration records. Formation documents for the LLC. A clean line from creation to control. No room for Tyler to wave his hands and call it collaborative evolution. The second was the license. Dana flagged the exact addendum and highlighted the clause Tyler had triggered with his own termination letter. Helix Harbor had the right to use VectorCore without royalties only while I remained a lawful active employee in the designated technical role. Tyler had ended that status in writing, effective immediately, in front of witnesses. He had not fired dead weight. He had cancelled the condition keeping his company alive for free. The third was the disclosure problem. That was the one banker's fear because it spreads. We pulled the investor deck, the talking points, the due diligence summaries, and the language prepared for roadshow conversations. Over and over, Helix described VectorCore as proprietary, internal, defensible, and core to future growth. The company had built an offering story around stable control of technology it did not actually own. Borrowed. Presented as owned. We added supporting proof behind the 3 pillars. My termination letter with the timestamp. The preservation notice Dana had sent overnight. Authentication logs showing the license path shutting down only after my status changed. Fail-safe logs proving the system was degrading lawfully, not being vandalized. Internal emails where legal had raised chain of title concerns and Tyler had brushed cleanup off until after listing. One email mattered more than the rest. It came from outside counsel 3 weeks earlier. The subject line was simple. IP ownership clarification before final disclosure review. Tyler had replied with one sentence. We are not reopening this before the bell. Marcus read that twice and said, that one stays on top. By then, the company had started calling everyone except the truth. Operations blamed infrastructure. Finance blamed timing. One board member wanted to know whether I had gone rogue. Dana answered that in one line. Mr. Rowan has done nothing outside the boundaries of the signed license agreement and applicable law. Clean. Cold. Final. At 8:03, Marcus filed for emergency relief to prevent unlicensed use and preserve all relevant records. Dana sent sealed copies of the evidence packet to Helix General Counsel, the board chair, and the lead banker handling the offering in New York. I prepared one more set for Tyler himself. Because men like Tyler only understand a disaster when it arrives in a folder thick enough to feel in their hands. I printed every exhibit on plain white paper. No speeches. No cover note. Just tabs. Ownership. License. Disclosure. I slid them into 4 envelopes and wrote the names myself. The one for Tyler sat on the kitchen table a second longer than the rest. I thought about every Sunday dinner where he had spoken over Elaine. Every meeting where he had turned my work into his shine. Every time he had mistaken my silence for permission. Then I sealed it. At 8:11 a.m., Dana called with the update. The banker had paused the launch. Sequence pending immediate review. Helix Harbor's executive team had been pulled into an emergency meeting at the company's North San Jose headquarters. New York was already on screen. Wall Street was awake. Reading. Not cancelled. Not yet. Worse. Paused meant people were reading. And once people started reading, Tyler's talent stopped mattering. He could not charm a clause. He could not outtalk a timestamp. He could not smile his way around a codebase that belonged to somebody else. I grabbed my coat, the envelopes, and the copy of the termination letter he had handed me at Elaine's table. By then, this was no longer a technical issue. No longer a family insult. No longer a power struggle inside a startup. It was a disclosure problem with a face attached to it. And I was on my way to let that face read it. The conference room sat inside Helix Harbor's North San Jose headquarters, all glass walls, bad coffee, and the kind of forced calm people wear when New York is already waiting on screen. Tyler was already at the far end of the table, tie perfect, smile missing. 3 bankers filled the main screen from Manhattan. General Counsel sat to his right. Arthur Neiman from the board sat near the window with my envelope in front of him. Wall Street was not in the room. It was watching the room. Dana walked in beside me with a slim folder. I carried 4 envelopes and the termination letter Tyler had handed me at Elaine's table. No speech. No hurry. Just steps. Tyler stood first. "What are you doing here?" Dana answered before I could. "Delivering documents relevant to your launch." That landed harder than anger would have. Lawyers hear danger fastest when language gets careful. I set the envelopes down one by one. Arthur. General Counsel. Lead banker. Tyler. Tyler touched his first. "Michael, if this is about leverage, we can discuss a package after today." I looked at him, then at the banker on the screen. "It is not about a package." I opened Dana's folder and placed the first set of papers on the table. "This is the ownership record." No one interrupted. Tyler usually filled silence before anyone else could. This time he waited because he did not know which lie would survive the next 10 seconds. I slid the copyright filing forward. Then the Rowan logic. Formation papers. Then the repository snapshots Marcus had organized before dawn. Dates. Headers. Commit history. A straight line from me to VectorCore before Helix Harbor became a company. General Counsel leaned in. Arthur opened the packet. One banker asked if it was verified. Dana said yes. Originals are available immediately. Tyler laughed fast. "This is old consulting material. We evolved the platform in-house years ago." I nodded once. "You evolved a licensed engine. You did not acquire ownership of it." I lifted the second packet. "This is the license you signed." Dana opened it to the addendum and turned it toward General Counsel. The highlighted clause sat there in plain language. Royalty-free use of VectorCore while Michael Rowan remains a lawful active employee in the designated technical role. Termination of that status ends the no-fee license. General Counsel checked Tyler's letter against the addendum. Then she checked it again. Tyler looked at her for denial. He did not get it. I placed his termination letter beside the clause. "This is the status change you made effective last night." Tyler pulled in a breath. "We can dispute whether this provision still applies to the current platform." Marcus Lee appeared on the side screen from Counsel's office in Palo Alto. "You can dispute anything. The packet includes creation history, code lineage, deployment dependencies, and prior legal notices on chain of title. The present issue is narrower. Your client terminated the condition that allowed continued use at no cost." Tyler snapped back. "He is not my client." Marcus did not blink. "Not today." One banker muted himself and turned away to speak to someone off-screen. The pause had reached the people who move clocks. Tyler tried again. "Michael, this is reckless. We are hours from the bell." I kept my voice low. "You were minutes from the bell when you slid that letter across your mother's table." His face changed. Not shame. Annoyance. "Do not do that here," he said. "Do what?" "Make this personal." I let that sit. "You did that last night." "I am making it documentary." Arthur looked up then. Dana handed him the third packet. "This is your IPO language." Arthur opened the folder. Then General Counsel. Investor deck. Roadshow talking points. Internal disclosure summary. Repeated phrases. Proprietary platform. Owned core engine. Defensible infrastructure. Stable internal control of the software layer driving future scale. Borrowed. Presented as owned. General Counsel's face flattened in the way lawyers do when a problem stops being hypothetical. Tyler grabbed the deck. "Those are standard positioning phrases. Dana answered. Not when control of the core technology is conditional and that condition was terminated before launch. The banker unmuted. Was outside counsel aware of this license structure during final disclosure review? General counsel did not answer immediately. Until then, Tyler could still pretend this was a negotiation with me. Now it had become a question of who knew what and when. Arthur turned to Tyler. Were they? Tyler straightened. Legal had flagged some cleanup items. This was not material to launch. I placed one email on top of everything else. Subject line. IP ownership clarification before final disclosure review. His reply was one sentence. We are not reopening this before the bell. Tyler pushed his chair back half an inch. This is absurd. We built this company together. No, I said. You built a story around a system I agreed to let you use. He looked at the board. Then the bankers. Then at me. You are trying to hold the company hostage because you could not handle transition. Dana slid the server logs forward. He did not delete data. He did not corrupt the platform. He terminated licensed authentication after your notice made continued free use unlawful. Fail-safe behavior began after the contract changed, not before. Marcus added, if anyone here wants to use the word sabotage, I advise caution. Tyler's jaw flexed. You have always resented me. That almost made me smile. Resentment is loud. This is accounting. The lead banker asked the question that mattered. Mr. Rowan, are you seeking to shut the company down? I answered him, not Tyler. No. I am seeking to stop unlicensed use and correct a false market story before it gets worse. Then I gave them the door. Helix Harbor can suspend the launch, correct its disclosures, restore the equity and role-based obligations altered in bad faith, and negotiate a proper exclusive license or asset purchase through Rowan Logic at market value. During that process, Mr. Beck should step aside from operational control. Tyler laughed once. You think I am stepping aside? I met his eyes. I think you already did. You just have not noticed the room move yet. Arthur closed the third packet. Tyler stopped talking. He did. Not stop right away. Men like Tyler never do. He tried optics, timelines, engineering ego, last-minute leverage. Every sentence made him smaller. If you have ever trusted a clean suit over a quiet record, this is where the lesson starts. Not when the liar speaks. When the documents arrive. General counsel finally spoke to the bankers. We need to pause all launch activity pending immediate internal review. Tyler turned to Arthur. Tell them this is contained. Arthur folded his hands. It was contained. Until you handed him that letter. Tyler looked at me then with something new in his face. Not rage. Recognition. I stood, but I did not leave yet. I placed his own termination letter neatly over the highlighted clause. You called me outdated. But this company goes dark the second my signature stops covering your code. His lips parted then closed. So I gave him the sentence he had earned. You did not clean up your leadership team. You terminated the license behind your IPO. No one said anything after that. By then the room understood what Tyler had refused to learn. I was not the relic he dragged into the light to make himself look newer. I was the builder who had let a borrower wear my work-like status. And now the borrower had been asked to read the bill. General counsel reached the clause first. Then Arthur did. Then the banker on the main screen leaned back and took off his glasses. No one looked at me like an aging engineer anymore. They looked at Tyler like a live risk sitting in an expensive chair. That was the moment the room shut down. The launch was paused on the spot. Not delayed for optics. Not softened with polite language. Paused. The kind of word that drains heat out of a founder faster than any insult ever could. One banker asked for all external communications to stop. General counsel asked for every version of the deck, every disclosure draft, and every internal note tied to VectorCore. Arthur asked Tyler for his phone. Tyler did the worst thing a man can do when paper turns against him. He kept talking. He said I was bitter. He said I was punishing the company. He said nobody would let one old engineer destroy a public offering over a technicality. Dana answered with timestamps. Marcus answered with logs. General Counsel answered with silence, which was somehow colder than both. Then Arthur said Tyler was stepping out of operational control pending review. That ended it. Tyler stood so fast his chair rolled back into the table. For a second, he looked less like a CEO and more like a boy who had finally met a consequence that would not negotiate. He looked at me as if I should save him from the thing he had signed. I did not. I picked up my coat. I nodded to Dana. Then I walked out of that room while they were still deciding how much of his future could be salvaged. Outside, the North San Jose morning looked ordinary in the cruelest way. Office glass. Traffic. Sunlight. I bought a coffee in the lobby, stood beside my car, and called Elaine. She answered on the first ring. I told her only the truth. It is done. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she said she understood. Helix Harbor never rang the bell that week. The launch froze, the board opened a full review, and the story Tyler had been selling started collapsing under its own shine. He did not lose everything in one dramatic second. It happened slower than that. Which was better. Every delay cost money. Every revision cost trust. Every question from counsel cost him more of the image he had lived on. The funds stayed skittish. The bankers rewrote timelines. Reporters sniffed around without getting the full story. Tyler hated that part most. He could argue with me. He could not argue with a market that had already started treating him like noise instead of leadership. Image could not save him then. I did not go back to rescue anything. That part mattered. A month later, Rowan Logic negotiated a new agreement from a position the old one had never allowed me to have. Paid licensing. Clear ownership language. Strict operational boundaries. No family dinners mixed with board politics. No more pretending gratitude was compensation. Helix survived, but not on Tyler's terms. He was removed from day-to-day control before summer ended. Elaine saw all of it with clearer eyes than before. She did not ask me to undo what happened. She did not ask me to absorb the insult for peace. One quiet Sunday morning in Willow Glen, she stood beside me in the kitchen, while I made grilled cheese and tomato soup, and she said the sentence I think she had been holding back for years. He was borrowing your work and calling it love. I looked at her, then back at the stove. Maybe that was the whole story. I never went back into that company as someone's silent safety net again. I kept my distance. I kept my name where it belonged. And I stopped confusing patience with surrender. I build to protect, not to be erased. If you have ever watched someone use family as a shortcut to your labor, remember this. Respect without boundaries is just access with better manners. And if somebody keeps asking you to trust their version, stop listening. Ask to read it.